which by definition we all want. However, what I don't want is the drama, because, you know, Kyla's never been nice to me.
Is there a reason she has a problem with it?
She said she was upset because we started dating and they weren't quite finished. I said, except you were finished. You were finished.
She wasn't quite finished.
And it never once came back to, I heard you say this. I heard you did this. I've never done nothing to her. Well, she came here so we could have a meeting. And to be honest, most of it, she acted like she didn't even know she did nothing to me. She's like, well, what'd I do? Well, how did you remember that? Oh, y'all remember all kinds of old stuff. If you're gonna hold on to old stuff. And I said, it's not old. This was last month that you were talking about me.
When Kimmi Scott finally broke her silence, it didn't feel like just another reality TV moment. It felt personal, heavy, almost uncomfortable to watch. Not because it was messy drama, but because it was real in a way people didn't expect. There was no laughter to soften the tension, no playful shade to keep things light, just her voice, calm but firm, cutting through all the noise that had been building for months. You could tell something had shifted.
Y'all talk about my things.
Okay.
Like my family, what's going on with my family, my grandkids.
And we will.
So when I ask, okay, but that's what I'm saying. I need you to be transparent too.
I am transparent.
When it comes talking about like y'all's life or like what's going on with you all.
This wasn't the same Kimmi fans were used to seeing. The strong, composed woman who usually handled situations with quiet grace now had a different energy. Not loud, not explosive, but direct, intentional, like someone who had finally reached a point where staying silent cost more than speaking up. And what she said, it caught people off guard, because this time the focus wasn't just on her health journey. It wasn't just about strength or survival. It was about something deeper, something that had been sitting under the surface for a long time. Her words hinted at betrayal, not the kind people expect with cheating rumors or secret texts, but something more complicated, something emotional, something that made fans stop and ask, was the man standing beside her really standing for her or standing for something else? And just like that, the conversation changed, because what nobody expected was for Kimmi to question the way her own story had been handled, especially by the person who was supposed to protect her the most.
We're gonna do some more dinners, some more lunches.
As much as we talk, I feel like sometimes you two are not transparent.
Kimmi Scott has always been one of those people who didn't need to be the loudest in the room to be heard. From the moment she stepped into the spotlight, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that made people pay attention. She wasn't about unnecessary drama. She didn't chase moments. She simply existed in her truth, and somehow that made her one of the most respected figures on the show. Before everything changed, her life looked like something many people admired: a successful career in healthcare, a blended family she openly embraced, and a marriage that, at least on the surface, seemed solid. She and Maurice were often seen as a team, two people who had built something meaningful together after finding love later in life. Their dynamic felt mature, grounded, different from the chaos that surrounded other relationships on the show. Kimmi wasn't just a reality TV personality. She was a nurse, someone who spent her life taking care of others. That alone made her relatable. She wasn't chasing fame. She already had purpose. So when she opened up about her personal life, people listened differently. There was a sense of authenticity that couldn't be faked. And then came the moment that changed everything: her diagnosis. When she revealed that she was battling breast cancer, it hit viewers hard. This wasn't scripted drama. This wasn't relationship gossip. This was life and death. Suddenly, everything else felt small compared to what she was facing. People saw her differently after that, not just as a cast member, but as a woman fighting one of the toughest battles anyone can face. The support came instantly. Messages flooded in from fans who admired her courage. Women shared their own stories. Some even said her openness pushed them to go get checked themselves. It became bigger than television, bigger than entertainment. But with that attention came something else: exposure. Every appointment, every emotional moment, every piece of her journey started becoming part of the show's narrative. At first, it felt like awareness, like something meaningful was being shared. But over time, the tone began to shift. What started as support slowly started to feel like something else entirely, and that's where things began to get complicated. At first, Maurice appeared to be exactly what people hoped he would be, a supportive husband standing by his wife during the hardest time of her life. He was present, he showed up to appointments, he sat beside her during emotional conversations. On the surface, it looked right, but reality TV has a way of revealing things people don't always notice in the moment. Because when viewers started paying closer attention, small details began to stand out, moments that didn't quite sit right. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just a tone here, a response there, a shift in conversation that felt off. There were times when Kimmi would be opening up about her fears, real fears about her health, her future, and somehow the focus would drift, not always dramatically, but just enough to make people pause. Instead of staying in that emotional space with her, Maurice would sometimes redirect the conversation, talk about something unrelated, or respond in a way that felt distant rather than connected. At first, fans brushed it off. Everyone handles situations differently, right? But then those moments started adding up, and people started asking questions. Why did it feel like Kimmi was carrying the emotional weight alone, even when she wasn't physically alone? Why did some of Maurice's responses feel rehearsed? And then came the bigger conversations. Social media started buzzing with clips and breakdowns of their interactions. Viewers weren't just watching anymore. They were analyzing, picking apart expressions, body language, timing. Some people defended him, saying not everyone knows how to respond perfectly in situations like this. But others weren't convinced. They felt like something deeper was happening behind the scenes. And then the rumors started. Whispers that certain moments were being pushed for the cameras, that producers were encouraging more emotional scenes, that the story wasn't just unfolding naturally, it was being shaped. And somehow, Maurice's role in all of it started to look different. Less like a husband navigating a painful reality, and more like someone aware of how everything was being presented. But here's the twist. The real shift didn't come from rumors or fan theories. It came from Kimmi herself. When Kimmi finally addressed everything, she didn't do it with anger. She didn't yell. She didn't create a dramatic scene. She simply spoke. And sometimes that's more powerful than anything else. Her tone was steady, but her message was clear. She acknowledged that sharing her journey wasn't easy, that there were days she didn't feel strong, days she didn't want cameras around, days when she just wanted to be a patient, not a storyline. And that's when people really started listening, because this wasn't speculation anymore. This was her truth. She hinted at feeling like parts of her experience were being used in ways she wasn't fully comfortable with. Not exploited in an obvious way, but shaped, adjusted, presented for impact. And when she spoke about how that made her feel, you could hear the weight behind her words. It wasn't just about the show. It was about control, ownership. The difference between telling your story and watching it be told for you. And then, without directly attacking him, she said something that made everything click. She made it clear that her health journey wasn't something anyone else should be managing, presenting, or benefiting from in ways that didn't feel right to her. That moment, that's when fans connected the dots. Because it wasn't just about producers anymore. It brought the focus right back to Maurice. People started replaying scenes in their minds, looking at interactions differently, questioning intentions. Was he just trying to be supportive in the only way he knew how? Or had he become too comfortable with the cameras being part of such a personal experience? Some fans felt like he had crossed a line, not intentionally, but still. Others believed he didn't fully understand the emotional impact of what Kimmi was going through. But regardless of where people stood, one thing was clear. Kimmi had taken her power back. She wasn't allowing her story to be interpreted without her voice anymore, and that changed everything. The emotional impact of that moment went far beyond just one conversation. For Kimmi, it seemed like a turning point. You could see it in the way she carried herself afterward. There was a new kind of clarity, like she had drawn a line, quietly but firmly. She wasn't just fighting a physical battle anymore. She was protecting her space, her peace, her narrative. And that's not easy to do when your life is constantly being filmed. For her family, it likely brought a mix of emotions. Support, of course, but also reflection. Because when something so personal becomes public, it affects everyone connected to it, not just the person going through it. And for her relationship with Maurice, it raised questions that couldn't be ignored. Not necessarily about love, but about understanding. About whether he truly saw what she was experiencing, not just physically, but emotionally. Because being present isn't just about showing up, it's about being there in the way someone actually needs. And sometimes those are two very different things. For her career, the impact was just as significant. Kimmi went from being a respected cast member to something more, a voice, someone people look to not just for entertainment, but for honesty. Her willingness to speak up, even in a calm, measured way, resonated with people who had felt unheard in their own lives. Women who had gone through similar health battles, people who had felt like their pain was misunderstood, individuals who had struggled to maintain control over their own stories. She wasn't just representing herself anymore, she was representing something bigger. In the end, what Kimmi did wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive, it didn't come with dramatic music or shocking visuals, but it mattered, because she reminded people of something that often gets lost in reality TV. These aren't just characters, these are real lives, real struggles, real emotions. And when those things get turned into content, there's always a risk of losing what makes them human. Kimmi didn't let that happen. She stepped in, calmly but firmly, and said, "This is mine, my story, my experience, my voice." And that's powerful in a way that doesn't need to be shouted. As for Maurice, the conversation around him is still ongoing. Some people believe he meant well, but didn't fully understand the impact of his actions. Others feel like he needs to take a step back and reevaluate how he shows up, not just as a husband, but as a partner in something this serious. But the truth is probably somewhere in between, because real life isn't as simple as good or bad. It's complicated, messy, human. What matters now is what happens next. Will this moment bring them closer with a deeper understanding of each other, or will it reveal cracks that were already there? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, Kimmi has changed the way people see her, not just as a fighter, but as a woman who knows her worth, knows her voice, and isn't afraid to use it when it matters most. And maybe that's the real story here. Not the drama, not the speculation, but the quiet strength it takes to stand up and say, "This is my life, and I get to decide how it's told." Because in a world where everything can be turned into a storyline, that kind of truth is rare. And once people see it, they don't forget it.